Okay, we have another famous resident around Lake Martin that you have got to meet. This is Jake Berkowitz. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's beautiful out here.
Oh,
Happy to be here.
yes. Okay, you've got a great story. We'll get into that in a second, but tell us what happened this morning with a good friend of yours.
Yep. So I moved down here, Alaska, a few years ago, and raced sled dogs up there. And this morning, a good friend of mine, Yor Olsum, just won the 2018 Iditarod,
Awesome.
which is kind of like the Super Bowl of dog sled racing. So pretty excited. He crossed the finish line at 3 a.m. this morning. His first Iditarod win ever. Actually, his first sled dog race win in Alaska ever. So we're pretty excited.
Awesome. Okay, and so you're pretty involved with the Iditarod. Tell us how all that crazy stuff started, and
Yep.
then how you ended up here from there.
Yeah, I'm actually retired from sled dog racing now. I still do. NBC hires me every year. I fly up to Alaska, do a broadcast for them for the live Iditarod start. The Iditarod's a 1,000-mile sled dog race across Alaska, basically starting in Anchorage, Alaska, traveling up and over the Alaska Range, through the interior of Alaska, down the Yukon River, finishing in Nome, Alaska, between about 8 and 9 days later for the winners. The last time I finished Iditarod was in 2013. I took 8th that year, won the Humanitarian Award, which is given, it only can be won by somebody in the top 20, given to the person that takes best care of their dogs. So that's probably my most proud moment in the sport. Retired shortly after that. My daughter was born August of that year, and and didn't really want to be traveling and racing all the time. Ended up taking a job in Canada, and then wanting to get her closer to her family down here, decided to move down here, and here we are living in beautiful Alabama on Lake Martin.
So, literally, tell us about preparing for it and what it's like out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, so I lived in Big Lake, Alaska, which is like about an hour and a half northwest of Anchorage, and had anywhere between about 60 to 80 sled dogs. One of which, my main leader, is now retired here on Lake Martin, Pixie, who has also adjusted to Alabama life and loves it. As soon as it snowed this year, she ran right back inside and wanted nothing to do with the snow. But I had 60 to 80 dogs. We bred all of our own dogs. So I, picked the best dogs, bred them, and 60 days later we had puppies, and we would raise them all from puppies. And every year we would do a lot of racing. Our summer season we would usually spend doing tourism. I spent a lot of summers living on a glacier where the only way in and out was by helicopter. So we would have anywhere between about 80 to 300 dogs on the glacier, living in tents, and all the cruise boat people. Alaska is the #1 cruise destination in the world right now. They would come up, they'd fly up, and we'd give them a little bit of a ride, and it would make us some money. It would keep the dogs in shape. And then come September every year, we would start our training. We would run them on four-wheelers. The dogs would actually be pulling the four-wheelers. They would be on and in gear, so they'd be pulling against them. And then as soon as the snow flied, we would switch to sleds, and we would start racing come December, and we would race all the way up to March, which is when the start of Iditarod is, the first Saturday of March. And these dogs would typically have between about 4,000 to 6,000 miles on them every year that they would run.
Every year?
Yep, every year they would run 4,000 to 6,000 miles. The oldest dog I ever finished Iditarod with was 13 years old. Their average lifespan is about 17 years old, so they live really long, really healthy lives. Our food bill every year is about $100,000 for about that 60 to 80 dog range. So these dogs are treated incredibly well. They love their running life, and Pixie is 9 now here, so she's probably got another 8, 9 years of living on Lake Martin.
Jake. Okay, so the race starts, the big one.
Yeah.
1,000 miles.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so how heavy is your pack? And
Yeah, so there's about 20 different checkpoints or villages along the way. So we've actually shipped out supplies throughout the race. But it's not like NASCAR. We don't have a pit crew or anything like that. It's just me. We start the race with 16 dogs. And it's just however fast you can reach the finish line. Typically in about 9 days, which is when the front pack of us would finish the race, I would typically get about 18 to 20 hours of sleep over that 9-day period, broken up into about 45-minute increments. The dogs would obviously get a lot more sleep, but I was melting snow to make water to feed them. I was massaging them. I was putting their booties on and off. I'd go through about 2,000 dog booties throughout the race. So while they're sleeping, I was working for them. So yeah, I mean, you're racing to Nome. You're running as long as possible, resting as short as possible to get to the finish line. Along the way, you can drop dogs off at the villages or checkpoints. Just like marathon runners, not everyone finishes. Dogs are the same way. They might get a little bit tired, or they might, step in a hole weird. And then we would drop them and they get flown back by bush plane to Anchorage. Our handlers would pick them up and we'd go on with fewer dogs. So typically people will finish with around 10 or 11 dogs at the finish line, while all the other, the 5 or 6 other dogs are flown back home and they're already at their kennel. I'm actually one of only 6 people that's ever finished with all 16 dogs.
Oh.
I got a little bit lucky that year, but that's one of my proud moments in the race. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot tougher on the musher, which is the person driving the sled, than it is the dogs. The dogs are built for this. Humans are not necessarily built to endure the middle of Alaska on 18 hours of sleep for 1,000 miles.
Do you see anybody else out there?
Yeah, so we race with typically against 60 to 90 other teams. So you're seeing teams, but I mean, sometimes you'll go, a whole day without seeing anyone else out there. Sometimes you get into that little bubble. Some of the villages are bigger than others, anywhere from 20 people to 300 people. So you'll see people when you come in and out of the villages, but it's a lot of solitude. It's a lot of thinking. It's a lot of thinking at 3 or 4 in the morning when you're trying to fall asleep, and a lot of bad music that's trying to keep you up, and a lot of sugar at 2 or 3 in the morning, but doing anything you can to stay awake. And yeah, you'll see some wildlife. The bear, everyone asks about the wildlife out there. We don't have any encounters with the bears. They're all hibernating. Moose are typically our biggest danger. Because, on a deep snow year like they had this year in Alaska, the moose like to stay on the dog trail as well, because it's a lot easier walking and they don't want to get off that trail and they can get stuck in the snow. So there's been countless stories of dog team versus moose encounters, and that's the reason a lot of us carry, like a revolver with us or something like that. You can't use a normal pistol a lot of the time out there because how cold it is. Some of that oil and everything can seize it up. So you got to do everything a little bit different in that type of extreme weather.
Crazy.
Yeah.
You miss it?
This was the first year I really didn't actually miss the racing aspect. I missed somewhat of the lifestyle, but I've been able to stay involved with it enough. Who knows? I think I will run one more Iditarod in my life.
Okay.
Not competitively, but maybe with a puppy team, just to take a young team. Every year I would always have, my junior varsity team race. So I might run somebody else's puppy team one year and just go to Nome one more time and take a lot of rest and, run really fast with all that extra rest and just take in the scenery and get to Nome one more time.
We will definitely follow up with that. That is awesome. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.